The whole thing is to create chaos.
Oh, I just want some good news.
Oh my God.
Got any good news?
Well, it's deliberate. It's obviously deliberate.
Of course, it's control.
Tell you to vote, 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 but if you don't have any good people to vote for, then
who are you going to vote for?
Rhetorical. Everything is just...
And in the end,
we have no options anymore.
We have no options.
It seems like we have no options.
I'm going to vote for an American.
What the fuck is going on? Is a Fiji Mermaid sponsored special broadcast, your Canadian 2021 federal election political resource. On September 13th, 2021, I held the What the Beep Fiji Mermaid special federal election regional candidate debate. The debate consists of 3 parts. It begins with the warm-up individual question period. The warm-up individual question period provides each candidate the opportunity to answer each question to the best of their ability, uninterrupted for a total of 2 minutes, and the order of candidates was randomly selected in advance. The second part of the debate was the Battle Royale. The Battle Royale consisted of respectful debate between 2 candidates and 3 with an additional minute on first answering the same question, followed by grilling one another within a 5-minute period. The order and the pairing of candidates was randomly selected in advance. And the final part of the debate was the hot seat question period. The hot seat question period was an opportunity for each individual party member to answer a difficult question specific to their political party. Each candidate was given 2 minutes maximum to answer, and the order of the candidates was randomly selected in advance. Super. I would like to begin with the territorial acknowledgement. We acknowledge and respect the Lekwungen peoples on whose traditional territory the university stands, and the Songhees, Esquimalt, and Wasanish-speaking peoples whose historical relationship with the land continues to this day. Thank you all for joining me today for the CFUV 101.9FM Fiji Mermaid What the Beep special federal election regional candidate online debate. I'm joined by Saanich and Gulf Islands Liberal Party candidate Sherry Moore-Arbour, Victoria Green Party candidate Nick Loughton, Saanich and Gulf Islands NDP Party candidate Sabina Singh, and the Victoria Conservative Party candidate Hannah Hudson. Because the University of Victoria stands on a municipality division line, including 2 candidates from the Saanich and Gulf Islands riding, alongside 2 candidates from the Victoria riding, it is an opportunity for students and residents, as well as listeners and viewers from this mixed area to become familiarized with their corresponding candidates. My name is Pascal Sabine Ricard. I'm the host of the Fiji Mermaid and the What the Beep program on CFUV 101.9 FM, and I will be your moderator and facilitator for today's debate. In this role, I hold no biases, preferences to any one party, and invite listeners and viewers alike to make their own voting decision based on what they gain from today's debate. To begin, we'll begin with the warm-up individual question period. The warm-up individual question period will provide each candidate the opportunity to answer each question to the best of their ability, uninterrupted for a total of 2 minutes, in the order of candidates has been randomly selected in advance. We'll be beginning with, do your individual values as a leader align with what your caucus members believe as well? And if not, how can Canadians depend on your word? We'll be beginning with Green Party candidate Nick. And I'm going to set the timer for 2 minutes now.
Thanks, Sabine. The Green Party is founded on 6 core values. Those values are respect for diversity, participatory democracy, social justice, ecological wisdom, nonviolence, and sustainability. I also hold deeply personal values of truth, justice, evidence-based decision-making, love, and compassion. Every Green Party candidate holds these core values, and we all align with these, and that's what unites us under one tent. It's important that when we strive for justice, when we strive to deliver evidence-based decision-making, long-term thinking, and sustainability to our communities, that we are all on the same page. And that's what you get when you vote for the Green Party. You get candidates that care deeply about the roots of their community, about their riding, about the people who live there, and the environment that is impacted by those decisions. But you also get a wide range of people who therefore can tailor those values to meet the needs of their local communities. When I'm running for Victoria, that means that I get the opportunity to speak to the values of the people who live here. The people who live here want a clean environment. They want to know that our coastline will be protected for the next 7 generations. They want to know that we're going to stand up and fight, not just for ourselves, each other, but everyone who lives in this community by providing universal healthcare, affordable housing, support to those who need it most. And that's what you get when you vote green. You get people who have conviction, who stand up with the idea that we have love and compassion for all of us. And that's what we're going to bring with Green Party caucus members in Ottawa. Thanks.
Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, perfect. That was just under the gun. I thought my beeper went off, but you got it perfectly. We're going to move on to Liberal candidate Sherry. Thank you so much. I'm going to set your timer right now.
Thank you very much. I'm a Liberal and have been a Liberal for several decades, and I'm also an Indigenous woman and a mom of 2 Indigenous children, and I've been passionate about representational politics and the election of more diverse candidates across the country for decades, and it's been a major theme in my work. I am a Liberal because of our inclusive commitment to diverse ranges of opinions, sort of big tent politics. I think that's how the Liberal Party is commonly known. And we absolutely are dedicated to creating spaces for not just diverse opinions, but processes to support how that functions well and then produces, I think, stronger outcomes in terms of, policies and legislation ultimately when we're governing. I think that our party is also committed to a kind and compassionate form of politics and government and pragmatism, so delivering on the objectives that we set out and ensuring that the way that we govern, we see sort of caring for Canadians as part of the work that we do. And to that extent, I am deeply aligned with both of those elements, the compassionate piece as well as the pragmatism of getting things done.
Thank you so much, Sherry. Fantastic. Once again, within our 2-minute range, we're going to be moving on to Conservative Rep. Hannah, thank you so much. I'll give you your 30-second warning as I have for everybody.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, certainly. As a conservative candidate, all of us are united behind Aaron O'Toole and behind Canada's recovery plan being the best plan to bring Canada out of the pandemic and into a brighter future. So yes, I'm united with everyone and fighting for affordability and fighting for a secure future for everyone. And I'd like to speak specifically about my circumstances. I no secret, I work for the Conservative Party, and just under 2 years ago, I came out as trans, and I've had incredible support from my colleagues and my bosses and many caucus members and people that I count as close friends, and so that I feel incredibly supported in that party. And I believe that the people that are running across Canada to fight for Canada's recovery plan and fight for Canada's future are united in to make sure that Canada has a secure future for everyone, and one that addresses the challenges we're facing, such as affordability, such as mental health crisis, such as making sure that we protect the environment. So I am proud to be on this team. I am proud to fight for this leader and this platform, and we'll continue to do so as long as right up until Election Day.
Super. Thank you, Hannah. Once again, perfect timing. And over to you, Sabina, NDP rep. 1, 2, 3. I got your 2 minutes on the clock.
There we go. Thanks, Sabine. This question speaks exactly to why I'm doing what I'm doing. We on the island are mostly represented by the New Democratic Party, and we fight for the environment every step of the way. So you've got Gord Johns and Courtney Comox, who's fighting against he's fighting against plastic in the ocean. Alistair McGregor fighting for the to get the freighters that are anchored off the islands regulated. We've got Randall Garrison, who's fighting for the whale habitat. And we've got Laurel Collins, who's making sure we have climate accountability. And now I don't think either the Liberal or Conservative Party has shown that they can meet the targets or want to meet the targets. And they've had many years to do that. Canada has not been meeting the targets. But what I know is that my team is about action. And I really want to be part of them so we can fight in Ottawa together for the island. The extra bonus is that my leader, Jagmeet Singh, is an amazing person. And I'm 10 years older than him, but he constantly teaches me how to turn hate and racism and inequality into love and justice. And I'm proud to be part of his team. We also happen to come from the same culture. So in our culture, seva and service to the community is very important. And I know that he means it and he is trustful. We're brought up the same way. And I will fight for Canada and take action with my team.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Sabina. That was great. Thank you, everybody. That was an awesome first round of our warm-up individual questions. Okay, so now we're moving on to our next one, which is, over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic, the affordability of life within Canada has been brought to the forefront as the cost of living continues to rise. How will you and your party address this? The first person I have up is Hannah for Conservative. I will give you your 30-second warning and the clock starts now.
Thank you. This is a crucial question because frankly, as I speak to voters all over the South Island and Victoria riding, this comes up constantly. Cost of living, you know, as anyone who's been to a grocery store knows, the cost of living has increased significantly, and especially when it comes to housing. The cost of housing is a significant problem here in our community and all over the country, especially for students. You know, I remember being a UVic student, you know, somewhat recently, and finding secure, affordable housing was essentially impossible. Conservative Party in Canada's Recovery Plan is committed to building 1 million homes across the country, banning foreign purchasers who just want to park money as an investment, and incentivizing construction of purpose-built rental, because that's rental housing that we need, and increasing density, especially around public transit. We need to increase housing availability, affordability, and make sure it's more secure. And, you know, on just cost of living, addressing the increased cost from inflation. You know, as we've seen over the last year, it's been a significant challenge, and Conservatives have a plan to make sure that we responsibly look at what things cost and how we can best support people. You know, giving the lower income people raises through workers' benefits is another way, but we need to make sure that we support those who are struggling with cost of living and make sure there are more opportunities and more things available, especially when it comes to housing. Thank you.
Super. Okay, moving on to NDP. Sabina, please. Your 2 minutes begins now.
Affordability and climate change are the two major issues of this election, we believe. And for us, affordability and climate change go hand in hand and are completely interlinked. So when we have money for our houses, we have money to go to school, we have money for healthcare, pharmacare, extended mental healthcare, and dental care, that we can then make environmental choices that we need to, like buying food locally, like buying air conditioners during climate emergencies, like being able to support our communities all together so that we can all fight this together and we don't leave anyone behind. Yes, we have a plan to build new affordable housing to support renters and to make sure that people, first-time home buyers, can get double the home buyers tax. We have a plan to stop using the housing market like a stock market with putting on a foreign home buyers tax as well. But the main thing is that affordability and environmental our ability to fight climate change has to happen together. And our plan is very much based on that.
Nina, that was once again really great, right within time. We're going to be moving on to green now, and I'm going to set your time right now.
Thanks, Sabine. The COVID-19 pandemic has exposed some pretty deep inequalities in our society, but they were present beforehand. I mean, our recovery plan out of this pandemic can't be focused on just recovering from COVID-19. Really, what we need is a new way forward. One where we guarantee a decent job with a living wage, quality education, safe, secure, and affordable housing, and truly universal head-to-toe, cradle-to-grave healthcare to all as rights, not just privileges for a few. Affordability in Victoria really does center around housing, and that housing must be a human right. What we've seen time and time again is other parties have failed to actually take the action that's required to build new affordable housing, to make sure that in our community, we're seeing the benefits of the plans and the strategies that are being cooked up in boardrooms in Ottawa. What we need is to work with our provincial and municipal partners and sit at the table until the job gets done, not worry about bickering over jurisdiction or complaining that the city or the province wouldn't play ball and then kicking the can down the road for another 5 years while people languish here in Victoria, paying $1,700 a month for a one-bed apartment. That means that your income you need is $68K a year. But the other side of affordability is wages. Hannah talked about inflation, but actually workers have been robbed of their productivity for decades. Wages haven't kept up with productivity, the skyrocketing cost of living, or inflation. What we need to do is not just address the lack of affordable housing in our community, but also bring those wages up through changing the rules around federally regulated employees to make all jobs pay a living wage and to raise wages in line with that productivity that's been stolen from folks.
I'm sorry, I have to cut you off right there. Time is
all
up.
Good.
All right, we're moving on to Liberal. Thank you, Sherry. And your time starts now.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Libby. Yeah, so the affordability crisis for sure was exposed, I think, more clearly understood when we're talking about the historical inequities that many of us who work in these spaces know well. We certainly saw them, the space between the have and the have not, exposed in a way that I think was more clearly understood. And so there are a few things I think that we put forward. For sure, the housing affordability conversation requires increasing the housing stock for sure, which is a multi order of government solution, but the federal government with the greatest ability to make investments on the infrastructure side are key players. And so we put forward money and dedicated money to the increasing purpose-built rentals and to refurbishing housing that is suffering and needs infrastructure dollars to remediate the housing that's very expensive to do. But the economic recovery is a piece of it as well. When we're talking about an ability to go back to work, that means do you have access to childcare, number one. We've obviously, many of us have heard about the $10 a day childcare initiative that is moving forward. That's a huge piece of an equity measure for women heading back into the workforce. But having jobs to return to is also a significant piece here. We've recovered 92% of the jobs lost during COVID, but we have more work to do to recover those remaining. And I see I'm out of time.
I'm sorry, I got you off right there. The beauty of this dynamic. All right, so that brings us to our last question for the warm-up individual questions. Globally, there is an environmental crisis being faced by all of humanity. Each country has to do their part to decrease carbon emissions. How will you and your party address this very real issue? And first up, I have Sabina from NDP. Your time begins now.
So we need to fight the climate problem like we want to win. And we're going to do it with the whole globe, as you say. One of my specialties is that I'm a PhD in global politics and international relations. So I feel like I will be an asset to my team so that I can help us work with other countries in the world to make sure we're all on the same track. But in order to do that, we first have to set a good example at home, because we can't go around the world telling people what to do or what they can and can't do when we're not doing it at home. So once we get under control what is happening in Canada, then I think we can be a really great example and be proud of what we have done and take it to the rest of the world. Right now, I don't think we can do that. Affordability means not subsidizing oil and gas, not making sure that the people who are making huge benefits out of the pandemic are paying their fair share. So in order so that we can all fight the climate emergency together. But first, it has to be done in Canada, and then we have to be an example to the rest of the world.
Thank you, Sabina. That was perfect timing. All right, we're going to be moving on to Sherry from Liberal, and your time begins now.
Unquestionably a huge priority for both of our ridings to our constituents and to the nation, climate change and the urgency of climate change action. I am always interested in conversations where we're putting forward our varied approaches to solutions, but what I'm not here for is incomplete narratives about the work that's been done. And you know, when fellow candidates assert that we've historically and serially missed targets, there's a really important piece of context missing from that, and that is that we inherited very low targets from the Conservatives and no framework within which to achieve any real progress. And Bill C-12, the Climate Net Zero Climate Accountability Act, is heralded the world over by, you know, serious climate change minds and organizations that have said that this is really it's a pathway to actually achieving goals through regulation, legislation, and then an accountability framework in law for those who are not good actors in this landscape. So you know, we made that, I think, is significant, and our plan forward is building on that. More aggressive targets and a wraparound plan to achieve those goals. So there's no arguing, I don't think, among us that climate change is real and that it's urgent and requires a whole of government effort. Our platform was rated 8 out of 10 by an SFU climate change economist, respected, you know, by in his field, and I think that that's an endorsement that is a significant piece as well.
Perfect timing. Thank you. Thank you, Sherry. All right, now we have Nick with Green up next. Your time starts now.
Pascal, or thanks, Sabine. Sorry. You know, Canada has the worst emissions record among G7 countries. And this is not just something that we've done at the, you know, federal and provincial level here in the last couple of years. I mean, we've missed every emissions target we've ever set since 1992. We've had conservative government between 1992 and 2015. We had a decade of Kachin and Paul Martin in there as well. So with that in mind, you know, there's work to be done. Let's not rehash the past, nor let's try to correct the record. Let's instead focus on the real action that we need now. Right now, we have a massive source of emissions in this country from industrial sources, from upstream sources and supply chain sources that do not reach the end consumer. One of the main sources of emissions in our country is transportation, and transportation emissions fell only 8% when we all stopped driving to work at the start of the pandemic. They give us a little bit of context as to the scale of the industrial and supply chain problem we're dealing with here. What we need to do swiftly is transition our electricity generation to entirely renewable sources. must be 100% by 2030. What we need to do is immediately transition our transportation to electric. We need to correct every single building to make them more energy efficient. What we also need to do is recognize that we have lots of plans and platforms from other parties that are rated highly, but their actions speak louder than words. We can't double fossil fuel subsidies like the Liberals, right? We can't increase fossil fuel subsidies like the NDP in BC and expect to get anywhere on the climate. Thanks.
All right, perfect. Thank you. And your time is just now. Good timing. Now that brings us to Hannah for Conservative. Your time begins now.
Thank you. I mean, the reality is that climate change is very real, is a serious threat that we need to address. I do agree with Nick though when he says the current government has not met their targets and is the worst performer in the G7. And I would just ask, say the Liberal Party that if they believe their net zero bill is such a winner, why did they wait till their 6th year in power to introduce it? Our plan to secure the environment is a rational and reasonable plan that will meet our climate commitments in an effective way. I'm passionate about the environment. It's what I do in my professional life outside of the whirlwind of campaigning. And we need serious action. And one of the things, there are many aspects of our plan to secure the environment, including expanding what BC does best all over Canada. One of the things that I think is I'm most proud of, and I think is that really what we need to be looking at hard, is carbon border tariffs. I think working together with our allies, specifically the US and the EU, places that there is, better environmental protection, especially when you're talking about the EU, and creating a block of countries that put carbon border tariffs on countries that don't have the same environmental standards, so that we're not putting our companies and our jobs at risk, but making sure that people from countries that don't have the right standards or the right protections pay a higher price, because we need to ensure that we are protecting the environment, we are doing what is necessary to lower emissions, we are doing what's necessary to increase the environmental sustainability of our society, but that we're not putting us at economic risk. We're not doing so on the back of hardworking Canadians. And that is the important thing. And that's why I'm proud of looking at things like carbon border tariffs to make sure that we create a future that is green, but also one that has enough innovation and enough employment. Thank you.
Super. Thank you, Hannah. And that closes our warm-up individual question period. And now we're moving into Battle Royale. The Battle Royale will invite respectful debate between two candidates on first answering the same question, followed by grilling one another within the 5-minute period. The order of candidates and pairing has been randomly selected in advance. And for the first 2 questions, there will be an additional 1-minute add-on to the 5 minutes with one of the other 2 candidates because of the lack of even distribution for a 3-question period. So what this means is that for the first question, it will be between Liberal and Conservative. And at the end, there will be the addition of Green Party for 1 minute in addition to the 5. And for the second question, it will be between NDP and Liberal with the add-on of Conservative for 1 minute at the end of the 5 minutes. So for our first question, our country has seen a significant divide over the last 2 years that has been directly connected to the politicization of the COVID-19 pandemic. There have been great swaths of Canadian population that sincerely believe the pandemic is false. These groups are increasingly becoming aggressive and use certain political rhetoric to bolster their arguments. How will you and your parties address this significant issue? The order of the 2 individuals for this begins with Liberal, followed by Conservative. 5 minutes begins now, and I will hold the timer up, and I'll give 1-minute interval warnings as well.
Sorry about that. Thank you for the question. Yes, the pandemic response, I think that, a great example of the politicization is taking a look at our neighbor province, the Conservative-led provincial government in Alberta, and you can see the stark contrast in terms of, ideologies driving decision-making relative to the science and the direction of doctors. On a national level, we, as a government, have put forward solutions that came from science-backed, physician-led groups, and were present and transparent about sort of the transaction of information. And while the political debate has often, what I've heard often is, the government directed one thing and then changed the direction to something else. And that happened as a direct consequence of learning about this virus and the consequences of the virus and the various variations that have come forward as a result. So again, completely scientifically based, and the leadership that we've offered has been rooted in science. And I think it's very unfortunate when, unfortunately, we've seen conservative leaders move forward with an ideologically driven agenda on the pandemic response.
Well, first of all, I think I'd like to say, obviously it's without question that a pandemic is real. And I think, we are seeing, politicization to an extent. And I think a lot of that is, due to the Prime Minister starting the campaign by trying to make vaccines a wedge issue when vaccines are, I 100% support vaccines. I'm vaccinated myself. I encourage everyone to do so. We shouldn't have made it a political issue. And I would also like to say, we have free debate, free right to protest in this country, but what we're seeing, especially at hospitals, is completely unacceptable. It's completely acceptable to block access to cancer patients to hospitals to make some political point. Protest us. We're the ones running for office, but don't protest the vulnerable people trying to go to a hospital. And I think that forcing people and lecturing them is not as successful as trying to educate people and trying to work with them to make sure that, some people have hesitancy about the public health system. Some people have bad experience with the public health system and are suspicious, and to just tell them, no, they're wrong is not the right thing. It's to explain, well, here's how vaccines are safe. Here's how they've worked. And here's how we're going to get out of this together, I think is a much more effective way to proceed than trying to make it a wedge issue and trying to say, well, you're a bad person.
Now, are we free to exchange, just to be clear to me? Okay, so I appreciate what you said, Hannah, that the pandemic and the consequences of the pandemic are real on a health level, public health level. But what we've seen come out of conservative, for sure, conservative media and conservative jurisdictions is a very rights-heavy conversation, which is complicating the change management process. And I will add that I've been working with the BC Centre for Disease Control on the pandemic response directly through our firm and my business partners and epidemiologists. So we're quite tuned into how this has been unfolding. I give credit where credit is due, and this is not a partisan piece. The way that our Prime Minister stepped forward and was transparent and spoke to Canadians on a regular basis is a crisis communication norm and helps to build confidence. And in terms of sharing our evolving understanding and leading people to make informed decisions, that's absolutely been a very big part of our national response. The provinces have had varying degrees of success around their communication, but for sure on a federal level, there is no denying that we have been transparent, timely, and shared the most accurate information available to us in a way that absolutely informs people to make decisions.
I would just like to, I would just like to ask you, do you think that starting the election campaign, the Prime Minister starting the election campaign by clearly trying to make vaccines a political wedge issue was good for the country? Because, the day the writ started, it was, we're going to talk about vaccine mandates.
And I'm going to cut you off there. I'm sorry, Hannah, but that's just the way these things go. 5 minutes. Okay, now we throw in the Green Party.
Sabine,
yeah.
Yes, I'm really disappointed with how this conversation went, actually. The topic of the conversation was politicization. And the only thing that we got out of this question, which framed it as how politicization is bad, was a little bit of political mudslinging between a couple candidates. Credit to our government, whatever, for getting us out of COVID, but really credit to the scientists, the physicians, and the public health experts for being the ones who are the responsible, level-headed people who discovered, how to make an mRNA vaccine. I'm a former nano vaccine researcher. I didn't think that was possible to do in a year, and I'm really proud to be able to look upon what my former colleagues were able to do in their pursuit of this evidence-based research. And instead, what we have is a conversation about how, you know, the federal government did great and the Conservatives in Alberta did bad, or vaccine mandates are great or bad. And I mean, the public health experts are saying, get vaccinated. I'm saying get vaccinated. The public health experts say to wear a mask. I say wear a mask. I'm not making this a political issue, and it really ought not to be. Let's focus on what we can do together for Canadians to get through this pandemic together, because that's what we're all about here. Not about mudslinging about what party's done well or not in the past. Come on, let's do better.
I'd like to just correct some of what you're saying, Nick. There's no question that we have excellent public health leaders, medical leaders in Canada who have offered steady leadership. But what the politicization looks like in the pandemic response is whether politicians get in their way. And there are jurisdictions where clearly politicians have gotten in the way of sound medical advice in response to the pandemic. And nationally,
that's not the only political issue, Sherry. The other political issue here
is important one.
Very clearly, but it's also very clearly that we have politicians, including liberals, who are clearly talking about this as an issue where they're setting the stage as they're the political righteous figures. When it's not credit to the Prime Minister, it's credit to Dr. Tam, it's credit to Dr. Henry for doing the work.
Okay, Nick,
they're the people who deserve our
credit. We're done, Nick. I'm going to mute you. Sorry, bud. But yeah, okay. And I just want to actually reiterate really quick, by all means, please jump in and rebut as people come in. Feel free to interrupt. And as I said, there's the additional 1 minute add-on when the second or the third person comes in for the next question as well. And please get in there. I know it feels weird on Zoom, so thank you for being patient with me. Okay, so what we're going to be moving on to now is the second question. Reconciliation with the Indigenous populations of Canada has been an ongoing topic of political party platforms for a number of years now. However, there has been very little progress or efforts made in this area. How will you and your party take action, if at all? And this is between NDP and Liberal, with Conservative adding in at the end for the last 1 minute. And I want to stress once again, please feel free to please jump in, and I will be giving the 1 minute warnings. And if you find it helps, 30-second warnings so that you can have time to plan rebutting and everything. So I'm going to set the clock right now for 5 minutes and debate away.
We're just debating, or are we?
Go ahead, Niddah. Go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, address. You would begin. Yes.
Yes, thank you. Yes, for us, this is a #1 issue. That's why Jagmeet Singh made it his portfolio, because it's so important. And I know Sherry will say the same thing. This issue is, we have had such a horrible history, and we are discovering every day some of this horrifying evidence of what the Canadian state has done in relation to Indigenous people. And we need to create a new nation-to-nation relationship that's really important. I work for the Center for World Indigenous Studies, and this is not just a Canadian issue, it's a global issue. But I think that the strength of Indigenous people throughout the world together, working with states, will really make a difference. And we can start building respectful relationships. We will implement all the calls to action, which have not been done. And we will eliminate all boil water advisories across the country. And we will take notions like free, prior, and informed consent very seriously. We have a fund that will fund relations between Indigenous stewardship of the land with our within our policy.
Okay. I don't want to cut you off, Sabine. Sorry, I know we're debating, but I don't want to interrupt you. Hugely important area of work, and an incomplete narrative for sure. So it is neither accurate to say we have done nothing, nor is it accurate to say we are done. And we have made significant progress on the areas of clean water and the elimination of persistent long-term boil water advisories that had been a struggle for communities to have a right to clean water a human right to clean water and or denied clean water. 109 of them have been resolved, and we've invested $4 billion in the continued work to ensure that all First Nations have clean water. And the solutions to getting clean water are definitely complex and not solely investment issue. So it requires a lot more than money. It requires capacity building as well. And we're here to do that as well. I will say, you know, as an Indigenous candidate, you know, these are personally significant areas as well. I was Director of Public Affairs for the Native Women's Association of Canada and worked very hard within that organization on the MMIWG call to justice, and you know, sat outside of government and was, like many who work on the MMIWG file, anxiously awaiting our action plan while it was being developed, and was very relieved to see that it came forward when it did. You know, in terms of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action, we, as a federal government, are working towards achieving the federal level call to action to the tune of 80% that are complete or in progress. So it's not helpful when we cast this in sort of a you know, we've done nothing, or you know, a party that stands up and says we'll do all of the things. We are working on reconciliation, but it's a journey, and it's a long journey. As Sabina mentioned, you know, there are significant chapters of our history that are heartbreaking, and as more than heartbreaking, that's too light a term, but the ongoing discoveries, and I appreciate you using that word, Sabina, because I personally find it very aggravating, or confirmations rather, not discoveries, when people mention that, you know, there are discoveries of children grave. We've known through testimony that those children are there, and that there are more there than we have found. And so this is unfolding, and the response that the commitments we've had are ongoing. Sorry,
that's okay. No, it's fine. This is the fun of this sort of thing. It's daunting, but it is. Please feel free to, of course, weigh in, Hannah, for conservative.
Can I rebut?
And you can rebut.
Question?
Absolutely.
Yes,
we've got 1 minute.
I'm wondering your thoughts, Sherry. Mumilik Kalagakshi was our NDP MP for Nunavut territory, and she had said in Parliament that the government has done nothing. She felt racially profiled in government. She felt that the Canadian state had not understood the concept of the doctrine of discovery. There are tons of people who are living in overcrowded and poor housing. And that's what her statement to the government was, is that you just haven't done anything. Now, I appreciate what you're saying, that things have been going. We will say you're not going fast enough.
There are times when I would have said that as well, Sabina, honestly, like as an Indigenous woman who worked, for example, as I said, with NWAC, I feel the urgency, and, you know, too late, I think, in a historical context, that it's 2021 and we aren't at the end yet, right? So as an Indigenous person, I feel that. And
1 minute. I'm so sorry to cut you off, Sherry. We're at our 1 minute mark. That was our add-on, and Hannah Conservative was not able to weigh in, so I will be giving on generously an additional 30 seconds. Oh my goodness, for Hannah to weigh in as well. And if you guys can squeeze in any further rebuts, go for it. I'll give you 10-second interval warnings.
I'd just like to quickly point out, you know, frankly agreeing with Sabina, you know, Sherry says that, you know, things are working, but the reality is the government missed their target for ending clean water advisories and missed the target. And, you know, it's, Jagmeet Singh is right.
And Mr. O'Toole said
Jagmeet
that
Singh is right.
Residential schools were actual schools.
We will end clean water advisories. Jagmeet Singh is right. If they were in Toronto, they'd be ended. And
the government continues to fight kids in court who've won judgments. I mean, Cindy Blackstock's doing great work, but Justin Trudeau thinks that those kids don't deserve money.
Agreed, Cindy's amazing, yeah.
Okay, we're at our 30-second mark. That was really awesome. Thank you all for being such good sports throughout that. We're on to our last question for the Battle Royale, as I'm charmingly calling it. And that is, over the last 2 years, the majority of Canadians have become more enlightened than ever regarding the deep-seated embedded systemic racism that exists within our society that many minorities have always been aware of and have been subject to, and this persists to this day. How will you and your party address this? I have the Greens and the NDPs on this particular one, but I have a feeling based on the way things are going, we should still include a 1 minute and have a full out grudge match at the end. So I'll start off with 5 and let you guys go, and then we'll add on, an extra 2 minutes so everyone can really do their thing on this. Thank you all. This is really wonderful. Great. 5 minutes on. So Green would be begin. Pardon me.
I'm counting. I'm looking at Sabina. I'm counting on you to.
Thanks, Sherry. Thanks, Sabine. You know, first I've got to acknowledge that I'm white. I'm here. I'm a white guy talking to you today. That I don't have the lived experience to speak on this issue in the same way. Through the conversations and dialogue that I've been working to have and working to educate myself on this issue, we of course recognize deeply embedded systemic racism. It was disappointing to see that even acknowledging that systemic racism exists in this country was a controversial issue at the federal leaders' debate last week. Addressing minority issues, addressing issues that affect marginalized communities in this country is not just about finding ways that target specific groups. Absolutely. When it comes to over-policing of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, we need to have a reckoning with the way that our police system here in this country has routinely oppressed those people. At the same time, when we look at things like a pay gap or a health inequity gap, we talk about programs like secure, affordable housing, comprehensive universal healthcare, quality education. These are the kinds of platforms and programs that are going to disproportionately benefit those who have been marginalized in the past. It's critically important that we take this lens from the race, also from the class issue, because that oppression has affected the level of class so deeply in this country. It's very important that we can address both of those at the same time, because if we cannot do one, we will not do the other.
Thanks for your passion, Nick. I have been fighting this issue my whole life and trying to expand everyone's knowledge. Like I said, Jagmeet Singh has been doing a great job of teaching me all the time how to move forward with peace and love. But I will have to say that in my riding, we have a conservative candidate, and I will also say your conservative leader, who have shown that they do not understand what systemic racism is. And if you cannot understand what it is, how are we going to fight it? And for me, we have to. This is part of the equality piece. It's part of the social equality piece, and it takes our country forward. When we recognize the strength of our diversity, that makes money, that helps us communicate, that helps us get around where we need to be going. It's good for our country. But if we go down the path of dividing cultures, people, Black, white, brown, the IBPOC community, which is Indigenous Black people of color, for anyone who doesn't know, then we will end up like our southern neighbors. We will divide our society and we will start fighting each other. And there's just no need for that. We have lovely cultures. I was just at the Dandiya festival dancing with Hindus yesterday. We have lovely cultures. We're going to the Chinese festival coming up. All these things are such great values of Canadian society. And until we really grasp the extent that we have been failing people with the RCMP throughout our systems of government and in employment and That's what systemic racism means. It's everywhere. So if we have to go through all of these systems to get it out, and I think that reforming the RCMP is a good place to start. But we have many areas, the courts, the jails, there's so many areas that need to be addressed in terms of racist discussion, racist division in this country.
I couldn't agree more, Sabina. I mean, the criminal justice system is one that always springs to mind as a hot button issue. We talk about the over-incarceration of especially Indigenous men in this country and the horrific subhuman treatment that prisoners experience in this country. That absolutely has to be a priority. And then again, as you said, systemic means pervasive. At every single element of society, we're being touched by the arm of systemic racism impacting the lives of people.
You off there, Nick. And I'm just going to fly in here and mention that this was originally arranged between Green Party and Conservatives, so Nick and Hannah. But given the topic and how it applies to so many different people that are at the table here right now, we're just making it a full everyone welcome sort of conversation. And I'm adding on an additional 2 minutes because two other folks have not been able to contribute. But thank you for your patience with all of this. And I really appreciate all of the perspectives that are coming in right now. So the 2 minutes begins now.
I will just say, I want to thank Sabina for her, for sharing her perspective. And I want to call Nick on the carpet. You know, we were talking about systemic racism. I think that there's a bit of an elephant in the room in terms of the recent report on your party's recent record on systemic racism and your failure as a party to create systems to address it. And that required an external arbiter's review. And certainly anyone paying attention to what's happened to your current leader really looks at the problematic legacy of your past leader in terms of building a party that serves, one argues, a very narrow set of interests and is open to a very narrow group of people, and those who are of color and Indigenous and, you know, trans have had a huge problem engaging with your party and have reported it, and even with the report have met no resolution that's satisfactory. So I find it's a bit rich for you to be sort of advising on systemic issues when your reckoning that you talk about needs to happen within your own party.
You know, Sherry, every party goes through struggles with issues like this. But to say that just because there is internal strife within the Green Party at times means that I can't even speak to acknowledge that systemic racism exists in society is, honestly, I find that a bit surprising, especially in the light of the fact that, one, I back Annemie Paul 100%. She is my leader. I'm so proud to be fighting for justice for Canadians alongside the first Black Jewish woman to lead a major federal party in this country. And given the Liberals' problem with keeping members of its own caucus, Selena Cesar Chavez and Jody Wilson-Raybould, and the allegations of racism that have come from there, I'd say don't throw stones from glass houses.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Thank you, everybody. Hannah, you did not get a chance to contribute, so I'll give you an additional 30 seconds to add your piece and go.
Well, I mean, I just think to just right out the gate to just condemn racism in all its forms. I mean, it's a horrible part of our society that definitely exists, and it's terrible. One thing I'll mention, you know, Nick mentioned carding and how terrible the act of carding is. And unfortunately, currently our public safety minister is someone who innovated in carding, Bill Blair, as police chief in Toronto. And so I think the Liberals need to look at their own, again, glass houses.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This was really great. And given how awkward Zoom can be, I realize in retrospect, it must be a little bit difficult to feel comfortable to, rebut and intervene when somebody's talking. So this is great. Thank you so much for your patience. We're now going to be wrapping up the Battle Royale section and moving into the hot seat question period. Now, as I mentioned in email, and just for everyone listening and tuning into this, the hot seat question period was actually not exposed, or nobody was really aware of what they were going to be alerted to in this period. The hot seat question period will be an opportunity for each individual party member to answer a difficult question specific to their political party. Each candidate will have 2 minutes maximum to answer. The order of candidates has been randomly selected in advance. And we're actually going to be starting up with green. This is going to be a bit of a doozy, Nick. Whew. Okay, you've got 2 minutes on the clock for this one. Going to give you a hint. It's definitely connected to what we've just been talking about. Your party has
No
strength.
surprise there.
No surprise, but no, your party has strength in your values and unity. However, only weeks before the election was called by Justin Trudeau, it became clear that this strength was at odds with the overt systemic racism that your party leader, enemy Paul, endured. Paul has been at the center of an internal fiasco due to her being Jewish and other party members making racist comments, among many other things. How can Canadians be certain that your party will truly work together to bring about the changes proposed? 2 minutes, go.
There's a very small but vocal minority of folks who inside of the Green Party have made some extremely objectionable comments, and I condemn them in the strongest terms. There's no room for bigotry, hatred, racism, homophobia, transphobia, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, or any other kind of xenophobic hatred, bigotry at all inside the Green Party, inside the party that I represent, and inside the party led by Enemy Paul. Enemy is a fantastic leader, and she has endured so much as leader of the Green Party. I continue to stand by Enemy because she is a fantastic politician. She is a fantastic advocate for the rights of everyone. And she is a fantastic person to stand up on the stage and be able to take space as the first woman who is Black and Jewish to lead a major federal party in this country. Yes, there was some recent internal strife in the party. However, given recent internal elections in the party, as well as a wonderful new slate of candidates, all backing Enemy Paul, we're having amazing turnover and creating a new, vibrant, welcoming, and connected Green Party that is able to move beyond some of these past allegations and also to support our leader and to support all who experience any kind of bigotry, hatred, or racism within the party. Thanks for your question, Sabine.
All right, super. Thank you, Nick. All right, so next hot seat question is for Conservative Rep Hannah. Historically, the Conservative Party of Canada has been the emblem of the 1%, though through its support of pro-life, decreased gun restrictions, disbelief in climate change, kneeling to big business, and more recently, inadvertently encouraging COVID-19 anti-vaccine rhetoric. As a party candidate, your opinions are your own, just as Erin O'Toole's are. However, there are more members of your Conservative caucus that do not and will not vote in the same way you will. How can Canadians be sure that what yourself and Erin O'Toole value will be put into action by your entire party? We've got 2 minutes for you. Go right ahead.
Well, I mean, I think, I did disagree with the premise of your question that the Conservative Party has stood for the 1%. I mean, where the party has gotten, won over 50% in elections, so clearly speaks to a large swath of Canadians. And we're also the party, that got rid of corporate donations in politics and made sure that, small donors are what is funding our politics. And, I mean, you asserted that the party is, pro-life. The party, I'm pro-choice, and the party is not going to regulate women's right to choose. I should say a person's right to choose also affects trans men and non-binary people. And, I think that I'm proud of Erin O'Toole. I'm proud of Canada's Recovery Plan, and all candidates for the party are standing up for Canada's Recovery Plan and what it contains, which includes things like immediately banning conversion therapy. It includes things like we're not going to put regulations on the right to choose. It includes things like standing up for bringing more LGBTQ refugees into our country because, we know that the dangerous circumstances many people face abroad. And I look forward as an MP to voting on behalf of my values and the values of the party. And I think that, I would say, look at the platform, look at our leader. And my commitment to you is that I will stand up for my values as a member of Parliament.
Thank you, Hannah. None of these questions are meant to be comfortable or good or easy. So please do understand none of this is personal. As I said at the beginning, this is unbiased and based on, general consensus or general topics that have come up. So the next person I have up is NDP, Sabina. This one is for you, and you'll have 2 minutes to add your piece and answer. The NDP party includes a robust climate action plan in its platform. However, the province of BC, the NDP Premier John Horgan has mishandled the Fairy Creek old growth issue, as well as pipelines are not off the table for your party leader Jagmeet Singh. How can Canadians count on the NDP to make a true commitment to climate change? And 2 minutes begins now.
Yeah, so recently Jagmeet has come out and said that he's not sure now that the pipeline has been bought and it's been in going and being built for so many years, the doubling of the Trans Mountain pipeline, that we don't know if we can stop it. We have, as a party, written about the RCMP in particular at Fairy Creek. That needs to be reformed, and the RCMP cannot be using violence, in this case against children, but it has been happening over the Trans Mountain pipeline for the last few years. And so we're going to have to get control of that and how policing is done in those areas, because the RCMP are enforcing a federal injunction at Fairy Creek. So the BC government is not the federal NDP, but the BC government has worked with the Niddah.Nadda and Huasat to get a 2-year moratorium on old growth logging in that area. So the old growth is not being logged in Fairy Creek. And then we have changed in the province. They changed the way logging has been done in this province for the last 100 years. So as Sherry also said, things that have been put in place are difficult to then change really quickly. And we have to make sure we don't leave anybody behind. We're not throwing people out with the bathwater. We are trying to make sure that people are okay, that our environment is okay, and that we're doing the right things that we can within what's already been done.
Thank you very much. That was fantastic, Sabina. And that you just made it right under the gun. That brings us to our last tough question here for the Liberal Party, the hot seat question. This one's for you, Sherry. So you'll have 2 minutes on the clock to answer this one. The Liberal Party has spoken a great deal about the importance of reconciliation, proposed many goals to reach with Indigenous communities across Canada, most prominently being accessible drinking water and the inquiry into the murdered and missing Indigenous women. However, these goals have still not been met, and relationships with Indigenous party members have been tumultuous at a federal level. How can Canadians, especially Indigenous Canadians, be sure these goals will be met? And 2 minutes. Ooh.
Thank you for the question. Maybe we should just be a little more specific. When you say that, relationships with Indigenous party members have been tumultuous, I think that might be a veiled sort of reference to Jody Wilson-Raypool and the unfortunate consequences of the recent couple of years. I will also say that I ran Jody's campaign for over a year, and I'm an Indigenous woman, so I have deep insight into a lot of that. But what I will say around reconciliation is that if I could snap my fingers and ensure that all of the calls to action and calls for justice were accomplished, I would do just that. I am very, very heartened to see that there is good work, smart work happening, and our money is invested in key areas where we are seeing progress. So clean water, it is absolutely not true to say we have made no progress. We've made incredible progress in a very complex file, and more needs to be done to ensure that it is completely resolved. And I am sure we are committed to doing just that. On MMIWG, again, I know that we are committed to the action plan, and this is depressing reality that missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls is a file because of the vulnerability that we face statistically and the number of us who go missing and are murdered. So the systemic pieces we're addressing as a party for sure.
And I hate to cut you off once again. That ends the 2 minutes. I just want to take a moment here and thank you all so much for doing this with me today, especially these harder questions at the end or these uncomfortable questions. I like to think of these questions in particular as an opportunity for each representative, especially being figureheads for your party, to sort of dispel perhaps any misinformation or things that perhaps you'd like to clarify. So they're not meant to be personal, stabs at the parties or you individually at all. It is all just meant to be an opportunity to chat more about it. And I just want to thank you so much for participating in this. This closes the CFUV Fiji Mermaid What the Beep Special Federal Election Regional Candidate Online Debate. I would like to thank each one of you for your participation today. Through doing so, I believe you have made political awareness accessible to a great extent for new and first-time voters. And I'd like to think that this will result in inspiring today's youth to become more politically active in their own way as they progress through post-secondary and life at large. Best of luck to each one of you in this upcoming election. And I'll see you at the polling stations or in spirit in the mail-in ballots. So this has been fantastic.
Excellent. Thank you, Sabine.
Thanks
so much, Sabine.
We're also
Sabine,
friends.
What the Beep is conducted on the unceded Coast Salish territory of the Lekwungen and Wasanich nations.